The battlefield was silent now, silent in a way that made the human soldier uneasy. Ashes drifted in the wind, broken machines lay in twisted shapes, and the smell of smoke still lingered in the air. He had survived the battle, but survival did not mean safety. Somewhere in the ruins, enemies could be waiting, watching, ready to strike. He walked slowly between the wreckage, his boots crunching over broken glass and scorched metal. Every sound made him alert. Every shadow looked like danger. His rifle was ready, but his heart was tired. He had seen too many deaths, too many faces vanish in the chaos. The war had dragged on for years, a war between humans and the alien race that share the stars. They called them enemies, monsters, invaders. But deep inside, he sometimes wondered if they were not just like him, fighting for their own people, obeying orders they never asked for. He shook his head, trying to push away such thoughts. Compassion was weakness here. Weakness could get him killed. And yet, even as he reminded himself, his ears caught something strange. It was faint, almost too soft to notice, but it was there, a whisper of sound, a small cry carried by the wind. He froze, his rifle raised, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Is someone there?" he whispered, though he knew no one would answer. His training screamed at him, warning him it could be a trap. The enemy sometimes left wounded soldiers to lure humans closer. One careless step, and he could be gone. Still, the sound came again, a weak breath, a soft whimper. It was not the voice of a strong fighter. It was the sound of someone broken, someone at the edge of life. Against his better judgment, he followed. He moved through the wreckage, careful and silent. Step by step, he came closer until he saw a shadow move behind a fallen steel wall. He aimed his weapon, finger tight, on the trigger. But what he saw made him hesitate. There, hidden among the rubble, was not a soldier ready to strike. It was an alien woman, her body thin, her skin pale, her eyes sunken from hunger. Her uniform was torn, her armor broken. She looked less like an enemy and more like a ghost of war. The soldier's heart pounded. This was the enemy, the one his commanders told him to destroy, and yet she did not look like a threat. She looked like someone who had been abandoned, left to die. She tried to move when she saw him, but she was too weak. Her hands trembled, as if even lifting them was painful. Her lips parted as though to speak, but no words came. Only a sound, dry and fragile. A plea for life. The soldier stood frozen. He knew what he was supposed to do. The right action was to finish it quickly. No questions, no hesitation. That was what soldiers were trained for. But his finger would not move. Something inside him refused. He remembered the faces of his fallen friends. He remembered how war had taken everything. And in her eyes, he saw the same pain, the same loss. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. She watched him with fear, expecting the end. Instead, he reached into his pack, pulling out a ration bar and a small can of water. He placed them near her, his eyes never leaving hers. She stared at the food as if it were a miracle. Her hands shook as she tried to pick it up. When she finally managed, she ate like someone who had not tasted life for days. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she did not stop. She drank the water, every drop precious. The soldier felt a strange weight lift from his chest. He knew this choice could cost him everything. If his unit found out, they would call him a traitor. If the enemy discovered it, they might see him as weak. And yet, watching her breathe again, watching her fight for one more moment of life, he could not regret it. For the first time since the war began, he felt he had done something human. And deep inside, though he did not yet know it, this moment would change his life forever. The night was cold, and the ruins felt heavier than ever. The soldier sat near the entrance of the abandoned bunker, staring into the darkness. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. But inside the bunker, she was still breathing, and that was enough to keep him awake. He had dragged her here when the sky turned red with fire. Her body was so weak that even walking had been impossible. She had leaned against him, half conscious, half gone. Every step had been a gamble, every corner a danger. If anyone had seen them, both would have been shot on sight. Inside the bunker, the alien woman lay wrapped in an old blanket he had found. She was thinner than he imagined possible. Her face sharp with hunger, her eyes too tired to stay open for long. The ration he gave her had saved her life for one more day. But it would not be enough. The soldier's mind was at war with itself. He had risked his life, his honor, his very duty for a single enemy soldier. If his comrades discovered her, they would call him a traitor. If the officers found out, they would execute him without a second thought. And yet, every time he looked at her face, pale and fragile, he knew he would do it again. She stirred, opening her eyes with effort. Her gaze fell on him, cautious but no longer afraid. She whispered something in her own language, words he could not understand. But the tone was clear. It was not anger, not hatred. It was thanks. He nodded slowly. "I don't know what you're saying," he murmured, "but you're alive, and that's enough." For a moment, silence filled the bunker. Then, with shaky fingers, she pointed at her mouth and at the canteen. He understood, handing her the water. She sipped carefully, as if every drop was too valuable to waste. Her eyes softened as she looked at him again, and for the first time, she did not look like an enemy. She looked like someone who simply wanted to live. Outside, the world burned on. He could hear the distant echoes of war, gunfire, explosions, the rumble of machines. But in here, it felt like another world, a secret place where survival meant more than orders. A place where enemies could become something else. The soldier reached into his pack again, pulling out half of his next ration. His stomach growled in protest, but he ignored it. He placed the food in her hands. This time, she hesitated, her eyes searching his face. Slowly, she broke the ration in two, pushing half back toward him. Her hand shook, but her meaning was clear. "Share." He blinked in surprise. Even in her weakness, even after days of starvation, she wanted to give back. It was a gesture he had not expected, and in that small act, he felt a bridge form between them, fragile but real. For the rest of the night, he sat by the entrance, guarding the silence. Every time she coughed or shifted, he glanced back, making sure she was still there, still alive. When dawn broke, the light revealed her features more clearly. Her skin had strange markings, like patterns of silver that glowed faintly in the sun. Her eyes, though tired, held a depth that made him pause. He realized she was not just another soldier. There was something different about her, something he could not name yet, but time was not on their side. Already, he knew scouts would be searching the ruins. If they found her, there would be no mercy. If they found him with her, his own side would end him first. And yet, he felt a fire in his chest. He had chosen this path, and there was no turning back. The soldier looked at her one last time before stepping outside to scout the area. He whispered to himself, "You're safe with me for now." The words carried more weight than he understood, because the rescue he had begun was not only about her survival. It was about his own humanity, and he did not yet know how much this choice would cost, or how much it would give. The days passed slowly inside the abandoned bunker. Each sunrise felt like stolen time. Each night felt like borrowed life. The soldier kept watch while she recovered, and she watched him with cautious eyes. They were enemies by blood, but in this hidden place, that truth began to blur. At first, she spoke only in fragments of her own language. Strange sounds, sharp syllables, words he could not understand. But her eyes spoke louder than her tongue. When she was thirsty, she would point to the canteen. When she was hungry, her gaze would fall to the rations. And every time he shared, her face softened just a little more. One evening, when the firelight flickered weakly in the corner, she traced a symbol on the dirt floor, a shape like a star, but curved differently. Then she pointed at herself, her lips moving with a name. The soldier repeated the sound, clumsy and broken. She smiled faintly, the first smile he had ever seen on her face. It was the kind of smile that could change a war, even if only for a moment. In return, he drew a crude circle in the dirt. He pointed at his chest and said his own name. She tried to repeat it, stumbling over the sound. Her accent twisted it, but it made him laugh. She looked startled at first, then laughed too, and in that laughter, the walls between them began to crack. Still, trust was not easy. At night, when he closed his eyes, his training haunted him. Images of dead comrades, voices of commanders shouting orders. They reminded him she was an enemy. They warned him that kindness could be betrayal. And yet, when he opened his eyes and saw her sleeping beside the fire, her breath steady, her form small under the blanket, the voices grew weaker, replaced by something else, something he could not name. On the fourth night, the soldier returned late from scouting, his boots heavy, his uniform torn from crawling through wreckage. When he entered the bunker, she was awake, waiting. Her eyes widened when she saw the cut on his arm. He waved it off, pretending it was nothing, but she did not believe him. Instead, she moved closer, her hands trembling. From a pouch on her torn armor, she pulled a small vial, glowing faintly blue. She poured a drop on the wound, and to his shock, the pain eased. The cut began to close as if time itself had bent. He looked at her in disbelief, but she only shook her head. Then she pointed at the wound and then at her chest, a gesture that said, "Now you carry a piece of me." He did not understand her words, but he understood the meaning. She had given him more than medicine. She had given him trust. After that night, silence between them changed. It was no longer heavy with fear. It was filled with unspoken understanding. He taught her a few human words: water, food, safe. She taught him sounds from her tongue. Together, they built a language of their own. Broken, simple, but enough to share meaning. Still, danger pressed in from every side. Once, while gathering supplies, he heard the distant voices of his own patrol. He hid in the shadows, his heart racing. If they discovered her, she would die, and so would he. When he returned to the bunker, she saw the fear in his eyes. Without speaking, she reached out and touched his hand, her fingers cold, her touch uncertain. But in that moment, he felt calmer. It was as if she had said, "You are not alone," without using words. At dawn, when the first rays of light slipped through the cracks, he sat across from her, watching as she carefully divided the last ration bar in half. Even starving, she refused to take more than him. He realized then that survival was not what tied them together. It was choice. She chose to trust him, and he chose to keep her alive. Enemies on paper, but something else in truth. He wondered what would happen if the world ever saw this bond. Would they call him a traitor, or would they understand? He did not know, but as she looked at him with those strange, silver-lined eyes, he knew one thing clearly. This war had forced them to meet, but something greater was keeping them together. And though he could not see the future, he felt it in his bones. This fragile bond was only the beginning of something much larger, something that could change not just his life, but the fate of both their worlds. The ruins no longer felt silent. They felt watched, hunted, as if the very air carried whispers of danger. The soldier moved carefully through the broken streets, his eyes sharp, his ears ready. It had been almost a week since he had hidden the alien woman in the bunker, and every day, the risk grew heavier. Rumors spread among his comrades. Voices in the camp spoke of an enemy survivor hiding nearby. Some claimed they saw strange tracks in the ash. Others swore they heard movement in the night. Search parties had been ordered, and the soldier knew it was only a matter of time before someone came too close. Inside the bunker, she sat by the weak fire, her silver-marked skin glowing faintly in the dark. Her health was returning, but with it came new questions. She was stronger now, sharper, her eyes following every sound. He began to wonder, was she really just another soldier? Or was she something far more important? That doubt haunted him. Every time he brought her food, every time he sat across from her, he felt torn. Part of him whispered, "She is the enemy. She could be lying. She could be dangerous." But another part of him whispered louder, "She trusted you. She saved your life with her medicine. Would an enemy do that? One night, the question grew sharper than ever. He returned from scouting with a stolen pack of supplies. But as he entered the bunker, she stood quickly, her eyes fixed on him. She pointed toward the crack in the wall, her face tense. Outside, faint footsteps moved through the rubble. Voices followed, human voices. The soldier froze. It was a patrol, his own people, only meters away. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling silence. She nodded, her breath shallow, her body pressed against the wall. The voices outside grew clearer. Search this sector. Command says the survivor was seen here. If we find her, we don't take prisoners. Orders are clear. The soldier's heart pounded. If they looked inside, everything would end. He gripped his rifle, his finger twitching. Would he really raise his weapon against his own comrades to protect her? The thought made his chest burn. But as he turned, her eyes met his, wide and trembling. She trusted him with her life, and he could not betray that. Minutes felt like hours. The patrol searched nearby, their lights cutting through the ruins. At one point, a beam of light slid across the crack in the bunker wall. It brushed over the alien woman's face, and she flinched. The soldier's hand moved instinctively, pulling her close, covering her with his body. If they looked in, they would see only him, not her. His heart raced so fast he thought they would hear it. Then at last the voices drifted away. The footsteps faded into silence. Only when the danger had passed did he let out his breath. He looked at her. She was still pressed against his chest, her eyes wide. For a moment, neither moved. In that silence, something unspoken passed between them. A promise, perhaps, or a bond forged by fear. When he finally stepped back, she reached for something on the ground. With quick hands, she drew another symbol in the dirt. This one was not a star, but a shield, a circle with lines across it. She tapped it twice, then pointed at him. Her voice whispered a single word, shaky but clear. Protector. The soldier stared at the word in the dirt, his chest heavy. Protector. Was that what he was now? Not a soldier, not a killer, but someone who stood between her and the world. It was a name he did not deserve, but one she had given him. That night he could not sleep. The danger outside was real, but the danger inside his heart was greater. The more time he spent with her, the more he questioned everything. His orders, his duty, even his loyalty to the war. He had thought saving her was just a single choice, a mistake perhaps. But now it was a chain pulling him deeper. Every day, he protected her. Every night, he kept her alive. And with each passing hour, the thought of losing her became unbearable. By dawn, he knew the truth. He could not turn back now, even if the whole world called him a traitor, even if it cost him his life. He had chosen his path. He would protect her, not because she was an alien, not because she was weak, but because she had become something more than an enemy. She had become the reason his heart still beat. The night was calm, too calm. The soldier sat outside the bunker, scanning the horizon. The ruins stretched endlessly, broken towers like jagged teeth against the stars. He tightened his grip on his rifle, his nerves uneasy. He had learned one thing in war. Silence was never safe. Then it happened. A sudden explosion tore through the air, shaking the ground. The soldier dove into cover, dust and fire filling the sky. From the distance, enemy shadows advanced, their weapons glowing in the dark. It was an ambush, swift and merciless. He scrambled back into the bunker, shouting for her to stay hidden. His hands moved quickly, loading his rifle, checking his grenades. He was ready to fight, ready to die if he had to. But when he turned, she was already on her feet. Her silver-marked skin gleamed under the firelight. Her eyes no longer weak, but sharp, burning with energy. He tried to push her back, but she shook her head. No, she whispered in broken human words. And then she stepped forward. The enemy's soldiers drew closer, their footsteps pounding. The soldier raised his rifle, but before he could fire, she lifted her hands. Light burst from her palms. Not fire, not bullets, but streams of pure energy. The air cracked, glowing arcs slicing across the rubble. The attackers were thrown back as if hit by an invisible storm. The soldier froze in shock. He had seen weapons, machines, and bombs, but never something like this. She was not just a survivor, not just an alien soldier. She was something far more powerful. The enemy regrouped, shouting orders in their tongue. Bullets rained toward the bunker, sparks flying. The soldier returned fire, covering her flank. But she moved like no one he had ever seen. Her body was swift, graceful, every strike precise. She was a warrior, yes, but more than that. She was a force of nature. At one point, a grenade rolled into the bunker. The soldier's eyes widened. There was no time. But she stepped forward, her hand glowing bright. She caught the grenade as if it were nothing. The explosion vanished in her grasp. The light swallowed whole. The bunker stood unharmed, and the soldier could only stare. When the battle ended, the ground outside was littered with silence. The attackers were gone, scattered or dead. The soldier stood breathing hard, his rifle heavy in his hands. Beside him, she was calm, her body glowing faintly, her chest rising steady. It was as if she had not just fought, but revealed her truth. He looked at her, struggling to find words. What are you?" he whispered. She met his eyes, her face unreadable. For a moment, she did not answer. Then she pointed at herself, pressing her palm to her chest. Her voice soft but strong, not soldier. She paused, then pointed at the stars above. Her eyes glimmered with meaning. Chosen. The soldier's heart pounded. Chosen. The word echoed in his mind. What did it mean? Was she part of something greater, someone far beyond the battlefield? He had thought he saved her, but now he realized she had saved him. Not once, but twice. First with her healing, now with her power. He sat down heavily, staring at the ground. His world was breaking apart piece by piece. She was not what his commanders told him, not what he had believed. This was no ordinary enemy. This was someone who carried secrets deeper than war itself. She stepped closer, kneeling beside him. Her hand brushed his arm gently, her silver-marked fingers leaving a faint shimmer on his skin. He looked at her, his voice low. If they knew what you are, they'd hunt you to the ends of the galaxy. She nodded slowly, her expression solemn. They will, she said in broken words. But you, protect her. The word struck him again, heavier this time. Protect her. She trusted him not only with her life, but with her truth. And in that moment, he understood their bond was no longer survival. It was destiny. The soldier stared into the night. The battlefield around him was no longer just ruins of war. It was the stage of something much larger. And though he could not yet see the end, he knew one thing with certainty. The woman he had found starving in the rubble was not just a stranger, not just an enemy. She was the beginning of a story that could change the fate of both their worlds. The war outside never stopped. Explosions still painted the night. Soldiers still hunted in the ruins. But inside the bunker, a different kind of battle was being fought. Not with guns or fire, but with hearts that refused to listen to reason. The soldier had tried to keep his distance. He told himself she was just someone he had rescued. That was all, nothing more. But the longer they stayed hidden together, the harder it became to believe his own words. She was no longer the starving stranger he had found in the rubble. She was alive now, stronger, her silver-marked skin glowing softly in the firelight. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now carried warmth when they looked at him. And when she smiled, rare, quiet, but real, he felt something inside him break free. It was dangerous, it was foolish, but it was also undeniable. At night, when the world was silent, they would sit by the fading fire. She would trace symbols on the dirt, teaching him her language, and he would answer with his own, showing her human words. Their voices were soft, almost whispers, not just because they feared discovery, but because the quiet made those words feel sacred. One evening, rain fell through the cracks of the broken roof. The bunker was cold, their small fire struggling to stay alive. She shivered, pulling the blanket tighter. Without thinking, the soldier took off his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. She looked at him, surprised, then gave a small nod. Her hand brushed his arm, lingering just a moment longer than needed. The silence after that touch felt louder than any explosion, but their closeness carried a heavy weight. Every day, danger grew sharper. Patrols searched closer, drones scanned the skies. If anyone discovered her, both their lives would end. The soldier knew this, yet he could not stop himself. Every time she spoke his name in her broken accent, every time her eyes found his in the dark, he knew he was already too far gone. One night, she woke from a nightmare, her breath ragged, her eyes wide with terror. He rushed to her side, asking if she was hurt. She shook her head, then spoke in fragments of his language. "War took my people all gone." Her voice cracked, her silver eyes wet with tears. The soldier's chest ached. He reached out, hesitated, then gently pulled her closer. She did not resist. For the first time, she let herself lean on him, her head resting against his chest. He whispered, "You're safe now." And though he knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep, she believed him. From that night onward, something shifted. They no longer needed words to speak. A glance, a touch, a silence. It was enough. When he brought food, she saved half for him. When he guarded the bunker, she stayed awake too, keeping watch over him. 2 lives, bound not by duty, but by choice. Still, the shadow of the war pressed against their small world. One evening, as they sat close by the dim fire, she looked at him and spoke carefully. Her words broken but clear. "I found you die. I died too." He met her eyes, steady and unshaken. "Then we died together," he whispered. She stared at him, silent, then leaned forward. Her forehead touched his, a gesture from her people that he did not fully understand. But he knew what it meant. It was not surrender, it was not fear. It was love hidden in the shadows. For the first time since the war began, the soldier felt peace. Not because the fighting had ended, not because the world was safe, but because in the middle of ruins, he had found something worth living for. And though he knew the world outside would never accept it, he no longer cared. The alien woman he had once saved from the edge of death was no longer his enemy. She was his reason to fight, his reason to breathe, his reason to hope. And deep inside, though neither of them said it, they both understood the truth. This love, born in fire and danger, was something the war could never destroy. The war ended not with a final battle, but with silence. Across the ruins, soldiers laid down their weapons, machines stopped moving, and the skies grew quiet for the first time in years. The soldier stood among his comrades, his heart heavy. They called it peace, but he knew peace was fragile, a thin wall ready to crack. Whispers spread quickly. The leaders of both sides would meet for the first time, a gathering of generals, diplomats, and commanders inside the remains of the Great Hall. The soldier had no place there. He was only a nameless fighter, but fate had other plans. He entered the hall as part of the guard, his eyes scanning the room. Humans filled one side, aliens filled the other, each group glaring with suspicion. The air was thick with tension, every breath heavy with unspoken hatred. The soldier kept his head down, his thoughts drifting back to her. He had hidden her carefully, away from searching eyes. He told himself it was safer that way. But part of him ached, wondering if he would ever see her again. Then the doors opened. The room fell into silence. And she walked in. The soldier's heart stopped. It was her, the alien woman he had saved. But she was not dressed in rags, not the starving survivor he had found in the ruins. She stood tall, in ceremonial armor, silver markings glowing across her skin. Her presence filled the hall with quiet power. Gasps spread through the crowd. The human officers whispered, "That's her, the alien princess." Princess. The word echoed in his mind like thunder. All this time, he had hidden someone who was not just a soldier, not just a survivor. She was the daughter of her people's ruler, the one chosen to lead them into the future. Her eyes scanned the room, passing over generals and commanders. But when they reached him, she stopped. For a moment, the world around them disappeared. There are no soldiers, no leaders, no war. Only the two of them, staring across the divide. The human commander spoke sharply. This peace will not last if your kind refuses to surrender your leaders. The alien general answered with equal fire. We do not bow, we do not break. The hall grew louder, voices clashing, anger rising. But she stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. Enough. The hall fell silent again. She raised her head high, her silver eyes burning. There was a man, she said slowly in broken human words. A human soldier who found me when I was lost, when I was starving, when war left me to die. Her voice carried across the room, strong and unshaken. He gave me life when he had no reason to. He gave me hope when this war gave me none. And today, I stand here not as your enemy, but because of him. The soldier's breath caught. Every eye in the hall turned toward him. His commander's face darkened. You, the man hissed. What have you done? But before he could answer, she lifted her hand, silencing them all. This man is not traitor, she said firmly. This man is protector. The word struck like lightning, echoing in the grand hall. Protector, the same word she had spoken to him in the shadows of the bunker. The same word she now offered before both worlds. The room erupted in whispers, shock rippling through soldiers on both sides. But she was not finished. She turned, her voice steady. I will not choose war, she declared. I will choose him. Gases filled the hall. Her meaning was clear. The soldier's heart raced as her eyes locked onto his. The starving woman he had once saved was now standing before her people and his own, declaring him as her choice, her partner, her future. For a moment, the human commander tried to object, but the alien general raised his hand, his voice heavy. If she chooses him, then let that be the symbol. Not war, but unity. The soldier felt his legs weaken, his world spinning. He had never asked for this, never imagined this. He had only wanted to save one life in the ruins. But that one choice had brought him here, to the moment where an entire galaxy's future turned on the bond between two enemies. She walked toward him slowly, the hall watching in silence. When she reached him, she placed her hand in his. Her touch was warm, steady, unshaken. Her voice soft, only for him. You saved me when I had nothing. Her eyes glimmered. Now, I choose you. The soldier's chest ached with emotion. He remembered the starving figure in the rubble, the weak hands trembling for food. And now, here she was, standing as a leader, a princess, a woman who had chosen him. He realized then that love had grown not in comfort, not in safety, but in fire, in shadows, in the ashes of war. And though the world still held danger, though peace was fragile, he no longer feared it, because the woman he had once called enemy now stood beside him as his wife-to-be. The woman he had saved when she was starving had become the one who would save him. Together, they were no longer soldier and enemy. They were protector and chosen, and their story was only beginning.